Seo was shocked to hear that now that he had become so weak, John wanted to cut off one of his limbs every week to feed the fox. That was certainly not pleasant. Staring at John, Seo picked up a rock from the ground. He stared at the rock and thought that, with all the violence he had learned from being beaten for 50 years, he could easily kill a modern man like John Hune with just one arm. He glanced at John again, who was still trying to persuade the others to make Seo surrender his other arm too. Furiously, Seo wondered to himself whether he should kill John, but he chose not to act impulsively. Instead, he tossed the rock aside and walked back to the cave. He realized that fear had clearly frozen their minds, and if he behaved too harshly now, it could create problems in his relationship with Director Kim. Suddenly, Chief O yelled at John to keep quiet if he didn't want his ankles broken again. Hearing that, Seo chuckled. He had been right to believe they were good people. It was simply a confusing situation for everyone. The following morning, as the sun rose, everyone assembled in front of the cave. This time, a two-headed snake appeared before them. But unlike the fox that had devoured Seo's arm, the two-headed snake merely asked for a small amount of blood. It was the exact same snake that had drained Chief O's blood, the one who had lost his limbs in his previous life. Hearing that it was only a small amount, a nervous Chief O stepped forward and offered his arm this time. But after drinking Chief O's blood, the snake gagged and vomited, saying, "This is disgusting. This is the worst human blood I've ever tasted." Hearing that, Chief became furious, but Seo understood it was the blood of a 21st century worker, soaked in nicotine and cholesterol. No wonder it tasted awful. Seo then turned around and asked John Mong-hoon to join him in gathering some herbs. Hearing that, John was stunned and asked Seo if he had really used his full name, but Seo didn't respond. Instead, he asked John if he was hungry. John replied that he was. Seo walked up to John and said, "I'll teach you about the fruits and edible herbs, so come with me." Seo leaned in and whispered to John that he intended to offer his arm to the fox again next week. And if he didn't survive, someone had to know how to live in this forest. Hearing that, John became extremely frightened, realizing that Seo had overheard everything the previous night. He had no option but to thank Seo and agreed to go along with him. Hearing his gratitude, Seo quietly laughed to himself because only he knew the fox wasn't returning, and Jian would never get the chance to use this knowledge. As the two of them reached a place filled with fruit trees, Seo shouted, "Jong Hun, how many times do I have to tell you that's the wrong fruit concentrate?" Seo apologized while picking a red fruit. Watching this, Seo warned him that eating that fruit could get him killed. This went on for hours as Seo kept giving instructions to John, and Jian had no choice but to follow them. Eventually, Jian began to feel drained and asked Seo to wait a moment, saying he needed a break. He had been digging endlessly to collect these herbs. Seeing his condition, Seo quietly laughed to himself because this was exactly how Jian had punished him when he first joined the company. Seo told Jian they had to finish before nightfall, so they needed to move quickly. Time passed gradually, and both kept working on their tasks. Then suddenly, John unearthed a huge ginseng. John was stunned to see it. Holding it in his hand, he said, "This thing is massive." He asked Seo if it was real ginseng. Seo replied that it was something like that. Seo knew that while it looked like ginseng, to be accurate, it was actually a yellow bamboo root. It could be due to the ascension path being so filled with energy, but here, yellow bamboo roots, usually no bigger than a pinky finger, had grown to this enormous size. Seo knew it wouldn't be very useful for cultivators, but it was an incredibly valuable medicine for martial artists known to boost ki, and it would likely benefit Director Kim. While they were talking, they discovered two more right nearby. Amazed, John asked Seo if it was alright to dig up so much wild ginseng. Seo naturally said yes and told him to take off his shirt and use it to carry them. Seo then glanced at the setting sun and noticed a crack in space. Seeing it, he realized that the cultivators would be arriving soon. He said to John, "Let's head back." As they made their way to the cave, the crack Seo had noticed earlier suddenly erupted with a massive blast, releasing an enormous surge of spiritual energy into the sky. At the moment of the explosion, Jian collapsed to the ground, screaming and holding his head. He wasn't the only one. Chief O was in the same state, along with Manager Kong. All three clutched their heads, crying out in agony. Seeing this, Director Kim started to panic, asking what was happening to them. Just then, 3 cultivators appeared, soaring through the sky. Looking at John, Chief O, and Manager Kong, a cultivator named Buko, dressed in golden robes, said, "What a surprise, who would have thought we'd find such raw talent here?" A black-cloaked cultivator named Huwok told Buko to back off, claiming they were his. Hearing this, the 3rd cultivator, dressed in blue, called Huwok shameless. Watching these cultivators, Director Kim became frightened and asked who they were. The cultivators noticed there were 7 individuals, but only 3 of them had spiritual roots. The others were simply ordinary mortals. Then Buko lifted his hand and formed a ball of lightning. He hurled it at John, who screamed in agony as thousands of lightning bolts surged through his body. When Buko finally stopped, he was astonished by how remarkable John's body was. It was the body of heavenly golden thunder. Then Huwok stepped forward, telling Buko to step aside as it was his turn. He was holding a musical instrument, and as he began to play, Manager Kong, who had her ears covered, suddenly started screaming in pain. But it wasn't an ordinary scream. It was so loud that it echoed throughout the entire forest. Seeing this, Huwok became overly excited, realizing that Manager Kong possessed the ghostly and transforming immortal root. He had never imagined that something like this truly existed. Then it became the 3rd cultivator's turn. He landed on the ground and, placing a hand on Chief's shoulder, infused him with spiritual energy. He examined Chief's body and discovered that it was a unique holy body. Chief was completely stunned and asked the cultivator what was happening. The cultivator smiled and announced that he would take all 3 of them as disciples of the Azure Heaven Creation sect, since each of them had the potential to change the entire world. In a deep voice, he asked Chief, "How does that sound?" Chief O was terrified in the cultivator's presence. He could barely breathe. He was overwhelmed, wondering what this power was, and felt like refusing might cost him his life. Suddenly, Huwok descended and urged Chief O to join the Black Ghost Valley instead, saying they possessed every cultivation method: immortality, the power to defy the heavens, fame, and fortune. He vowed that they would receive all of it within 100 years. Moments later, Buko also came down and questioned Huwok, asking what he was talking about, claiming that the Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder sect was the one most suited for them. While they were arguing, Director Kim stepped in and asked the cultivators if they could help them escape the forest, as at this rate they would all end up dying there. But the cultivators paid him no attention. Buko pulled out a bottle, opened its cap and said, "Mortals worry too much. How did you make it to the ascension path with such a useless body?" Saying this, he aimed the mouth of the bottle at John, and it instantly pulled John inside. John could do nothing but scream for help. Then the blue-robed cultivator took Chief O and glanced at Seo. He smiled and said, "Looks like one of them lost an arm to that fox." Noticing the wound, he decided to help personally. He channeled his spiritual power to heal Seo's hand, telling him that although he was just a mortal, he had courage. Seo's entire hand regenerated, and he expressed his thanks to the cultivator. He also took Manager Kong along with him. Then all 3 cultivators soared back into the sky, and before leaving, they told Seo that they had captured all the beasts and monsters along the ascension path on their way here, so the area would remain safe for the next 10 years. Watching them leave, Director Kim ran after them, asking them to wait and to tell them which direction to go, since they had no idea how to get out. He shouted for Section Chief John, Chief O, and Deputy Manager Kong, but it was pointless. The cultivators ascended into the sky and vanished. Watching them disappear, Seo felt deeply disappointed, but it was pointless. The same thing had happened 50 years ago. No matter how loudly they shouted, those cultivators treated them like insects and simply moved on. Still, Seo felt a small sense of relief, knowing they had at least healed his arm. While running after them, Director Kim became out of breath and collapsed to the ground, asking, "What do you expect us to do in a forest like this?" But just before he completely gave up hope, Director Kim suddenly noticed several beams of light soaring in the same direction the cultivators had gone. Seeing that, he grew confused and asked, "What are all those lights in the sky? Is something over in that direction?" But Director Kim couldn't abandon his team, so he turned back. The following day, heavy rain poured down with lightning flashing all around. All 4, Deputy Manager O, Manager Kim, Manager CIO, and Director Kim were taking shelter in the same cave. But Deputy Manager O's condition was worsening. She lay on the ground, coughing up blood. Manager Kim asked CIO if there was any kind of herb they could use, as Deputy Manager O's condition was critical. She was panicking, unsure of what to do. Aware of what the future held, CIO told Manager Kim, "Let's wait a bit longer. Someone might show up and heal her." Hearing that, Manager Kim looked confused. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps. Someone stepped into the cave and said, "Mortals on the ascension path are like ants, struggling in the battles between dragons." Seeing the man, Director Kim quickly stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled and replied, "I am the Sea Dragon King." The Sea Dragon King Sio informed them that Deputy Manager O was manipulating the storm outside. Upon hearing that, everyone stood in shock. The Sea Dragon King clarified that the storm had abruptly appeared from nowhere, so he arrived to investigate its origin. Pointing toward Deputy Manager O, he said that the woman lying there must have performed the sorcery behind the storm. The Sea Dragon King was astonished because she seemed like an ordinary woman, lacking even a hint of cultivation. So how could she possess such immense power? Moreover, she wasn't even doing it intentionally, which made it even stranger. Hearing that, Sio explained to the Sea Dragon King that in truth, they were the ones confused. They had only arrived in this place recently, yet one after another, formidable beings like him appeared and took away their companions. Upon hearing this, the Sea Dragon King burst into laughter. He asked Sio if he was claiming that among his teammates there were a few with exceptional potential, and then, as though it had been pre-arranged, powerful cultivators arrived and took them, and now he too had appeared right in front of this woman. Sio told the Sea Dragon King that's exactly what had occurred. Gazing at Sio, the Sea Dragon King grinned and asked, "Dear mortal, do you have any idea where we are?" He informed Sio that this location was called the Ascension Path, or simply the Path to Ascension. It served as a vital gateway that leads directly to the upper realm. Within just a few months, a dimensional rupture named the Ascension Gate would open right around this very area. It occurs once every 1,000 years. Innumerable high-ranking cultivators and spiritual entities would have already started assembling near the path to ascension to reach the upper realm. So, isn't it perfectly reasonable that cultivators like him would show up near them? Upon hearing that, they finally grasped the full picture. Then Director Kim told the Sea Dragon King that those cultivators mentioned they were taking his companions to join their sect. And if those cultivators were indeed ascending to the upper realm, how could his colleagues possibly accompany them? Listening to that, the Sea Dragon King explained that it might be difficult for ordinary mortals like them to comprehend. He pulled out a bottle similar to the ones the cultivators carried and explained that there was a technique among cultivators used to compress large objects and store them inside enchanted tools like this. Those cultivators had likely stored their sect within such items. Their intention was to ascend to the upper realm together with their entire sect once the Ascension Gate opened. The Sea Dragon King informed them that, in fact, he too had sealed one of the undersea castles belonging to his Sea Dragon clan inside this very item. Within it, 1,800 sea dragons lay dormant. Upon hearing that, Sio and Director Kim's jaws dropped in utter shock. The Sea Dragon King gently patted Deputy Manager O's head, saying she was unusual and fascinating. If she were to become part of the Sea Dragon clan, she could turn into someone truly remarkable. Watching him pat the unconscious Deputy Manager O's head, Director Kim lunged forward to stop the Sea Dragon King. But in the very next moment, he dropped to his knees as an immense force pinned him to the ground. Whenever Director Kim attempted to resist that force, it only intensified, applying even more crushing pressure on him. The one exerting that pressure was the Sea Dragon King. He raised Deputy Manager O in his hand and told Director Kim that he would offer her his blood and acknowledge her as his kin, and that would be best for everyone. That he then offered one more piece of advice. Looking at Director Kim with his glowing green eyes, he warned him never to casually question high-level cultivators. Right after he said that, the pressure on both Director Kim and Sio intensified and both of their eyeballs popped out. Cradling Deputy Manager O in his arms, the Sea Dragon King walked away, telling them he had only answered because of his generosity, otherwise most cultivators would have slain them for simply asking a question. With that, he exited the cave and stepped into the raging thunderstorm, transformed into his true dragon form and soared back into the sky. His dragon form was so massive and powerful that it seemed to stretch up into the heavens. By the next morning, the thunderstorm abruptly ended and the skies cleared. Manager Kim was still in complete shock over the fact that all her co-workers had been taken away. She couldn't comprehend what was happening, first an avalanche from nowhere, then immortals and dragons taking away their companions. It was too much for her to process and she began losing her mind. Seeing her in that state, Seo moved toward her, trying to comfort her. But while trembling, Manager Kim said, "Manager Seo, please, you must not be taken too. If you're taken, I won't be able to survive alone in this forest." Saying that, she burst into tears. Seeing her in that state, Seo wished to reassure her that he wouldn't leave, but deep down, he knew that, sadly, their time was almost up. Just then, Manager Kim felt something inside her head and let out a scream. She collapsed, clutching her head, and told Seo that something was approaching. Watching her scream, Director Kim rushed over and asked, "What's going on with her now?" Suddenly, the entire jungle descended into chaos. Birds in the sky and animals throughout the forest began fleeing for their lives. Manager Kim began trembling and told them that it was Head. Hearing that, Director Kim grew confused, and before he could process anything, an old man riding a mechanical lion suddenly appeared. That old man was startled to see mortals there and questioned how mere mortals had entered the path to ascension. But after observing them briefly, it didn't take the old man long to figure it out. With the ascension gate about to open, the surrounding space had turned unstable, and they must have been swept into a spatial storm. He laughed aloud, praising himself as a genius for instantly grasping the situation. He then stepped down from his mechanical lion and asked them who had just released that immense consciousness. He chuckled, saying it was such a potent presence that he had assumed a sage from the upper realm had arrived. Glancing at Deputy Manager Oh's state, he inquired if it was her. Director Kim stepped forward and blocked the old man, saying, "Manager Kim is our companion." But with a mere flick of his finger, the old man hurled Director Kim to the side. Witnessing that, Seo instantly leapt forward to catch Director Kim in an attempt to shield him. He managed to catch him, but was also thrown back, crashing hard onto the ground. Director Kim remained unhurt and expressed his gratitude to Deputy Manager Seo, but Seo didn't respond. Seeing that, Director Kim grew alarmed and helped Seo to his feet. To their surprise, Seo's entire back was exposed and injured from the impact with the ground. Director Kim was stunned to see that and asked Seo if he was all right. Seo, in a slow and weak voice, told Director Kim that he was fine. Meanwhile, the old man approached Deputy Manager Oh and gently held her by the chin, asking, "Let me take you in. You don't possess any spiritual root, but I can awaken it within you using my power." The old man pondered what might occur if such a peculiar consciousness developed into a cultivator's divine consciousness. Hearing that, Deputy Manager Oh began crying and looked towards Seo and Director Kim for help. When he saw her turning to them, the old man looked at Seo and Director Kim and questioned whether she was still clinging to her worldly attachments even after his offer to take her in. This enraged the old man. Channeling his power, he seized both Seo and Director Kim by the neck and lifted them into the air. Both of them began gasping for breath. The old man told Deputy Manager Oh that he would personally sever all her worldly bonds. Watching them struggle like that, Deputy Manager Oh became terrified. She started weeping, pleading with the old man to stop. She told him she would do whatever he wanted if only he would spare them. Hearing her, the old man told Deputy Manager Oh that she must let go of all her worldly attachments. While sobbing, Deputy Manager Oh told him that she understood. After hearing that, the old man decided to spare Seo and Director Kim, and both of them collapsed to the ground. However, the old man realized that if he let them remain there, she would stay emotionally bound to them. So he resolved to send them to a nearby mortal nation. As he said this, he activated his spiritual powers and opened a portal. The old man informed Deputy Manager Oh that both of her colleagues would be scattered randomly through a dimensional rift, and even he couldn't predict where they would land. No sooner had he said that than a large portal opened and began pulling Seo and Director Kim inside. Director Kim was sucked into the portal almost instantly without even grasping what was happening. Seo, before being pulled in, used all his remaining strength to grab the herbs he had gathered the day before. Then both of them vanished into the portal. At the portal's edge, Deputy Manager Oh stood crying for them. As the portal closed, everything turned pitch black. Suddenly, the noise of a bustling crowd filled their ears. A street vendor's voice rang out saying, "We have the finest silks in Yango. Fresh scriptures from Shanji have just arrived." Both CEO and director Kim lay unconscious on the ground. CEO was the first one to regain consciousness. As he rose to his feet, he looked ahead and noticed that he was in an alleyway with many people walking along the street nearby. CEO didn't recognize the place and began wondering where he had ended up. The reason it felt unfamiliar was that, in his previous life, he had never landed in a place like this. He got up slowly, realizing that the immortal had spoken the truth. The location where they fell was completely random. As CEO exited the alleyway, he felt that the path ahead looked oddly familiar. Looking around carefully, he finally understood this was the place where he had once spent 50 years of his life. Right in front of him stood a massive 10-story building. Upon seeing that structure, he finally realized that he was in the capital of Yango, Seeing City. What happens next? Stay tuned, the next part is coming soon.